So first of all, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so glad to have you here tonight. Some of you I know and some of you I don't.
Well, that's how I got in
We
trouble.
get to spend this time together. And I just want to give you a little bit of the agenda of what we're doing. So I'll introduce the speakers in just a minute. We're going to be watching a video that really helps explain Respond to Racism that was on localish ABC. And Jane is going to be talking about how our church, we had a group called Beyond Racism. She's going to talk about that. Willie Poinsette, our famous newly recognized Justice Witness award winner, woo, is going to be speaking. We love Willie, and she's really an adopted member of our church at Lake Oswego. I'm a member of Lake Oswego United Church of Christ, and then Jennie, our pastor, Jennie Ott, is going to be speaking about what it's meant for our church.
A little bit here.
Jan is going to be talking about the elements of establishing what are some of the elements to consider when establishing an anti-racism group. And we're going to be giving hopefully plenty of time for questions. And another thing I am going to show you, if I just need to get it up, hold on just a minute. I'm going to be, we have a pretty thorough document that I will put a link to in the chat window that you can have. And if you aren't able to get it, I can also email you. So I'll just show you real quickly what that looks like. So here is the document that I'll link in the chat window of how Respond to Racism got started, the structure, how youth are involved, some of the different events that have happened. It's been going for 3 years. We're entering our 4th year. Some of the recognitions that our famous Willie Poinsette has received. These are some of the elements that for establishing an anti-racism group. And then we have different resources and contacts. So there's Respond to Racism's contact, you'll have our contacts and other resources in an upcoming event. So let me introduce, first of all, I am Pam Rossio, and I am a newly elected moderator of the conference and a member of Lake Oswego United Church of Christ. We have Willie Poinsette, who you'll be hearing a lot about Willie, but Willie, her answer to a post on Nextdoor is what really started the Respond to Racism in Lake Oswego. We have Jan Standlea and Jane Lovelady, and they are very big movers and shakers in our church and are involved in lots and lots of things. We have Jennie Ott, our amazing pastor, who's also involved. Bruce Poinsette, yeah, you can't see him, you see this building. That is Willie's husband. And did I get everybody? I think I got everybody. So I'm going to introduce Jennie.
Thank you, Pam, and welcome to all of you. Just so glad to have you here, and we're thrilled to be able to share a little bit about Respond to Racism and the impact it's had in our church and community. And so we thought, by way of beginning, we'd show this video that was produced by ABC News in their group Localish in combination with Nextdoor, which is how this started. They came and filmed at our church. They filmed Willie and some others right before COVID hit and we had to close the church. And then, as you'll see, they did a subsequent interview with Willie during the time of COVID. But this just came out last month, and it's a great summary of what Respond to Racism it is and the impact that it's had. So we'll start with that first.
Okay, is it my turn, Pam?
Yep.
Okay. Am I on? Okay, I'm Jane, and I'll talk briefly about some groundwork that was laid at our church 5 years before we began hosting Respond to Racism meetings. Many in our congregation were first inspired to work for racial justice by an article Bruce Poinsette Jr. wrote for the Lake Oswego Review, which is our hometown newspaper. The name of Bruce's article was Personal Essay, Lake Oswego's Worst Kept Secret. It is not a secret that this man who wrote this article happens to be the son of Willie Poinsette and Bruce Poinsette Sr. So I thought you'd like to know that. And there's a link to this article at the resources at the end of our handout. Anyway, Bruce wrote this essay after 3 white football players at Lake Oswego High School were suspended for targeting a former Black teammate with racist tweets. Bruce, who had written for our hometown newspaper as a high school student, was now a recent graduate of University of Oregon School of Journalism. Bruce was candid about what being a Black student in Lake Oswego schools was like, as he and other students of color experienced systemic and overt racism regardless of their scholastic or athletic achievement. In his article, Bruce generously acknowledged that the vast majority of students really didn't seem to understand when they were being offensive. They just didn't get it. Our church invited Bruce to speak at our worship service. One of us, all of us, anyone who heard him speak will never forget that.
I know,
Bruce's article and frank but kind-hearted message to our congregation spurred the formation of an ad hoc group at LOUCC in 2012 that we named Beyond Racism. This group began moving our congregation toward doing something about the racism that caused so many to refer to Lake Oswego as Lake No Negro. Beyond Racism at LOUCC began our work by examining our own role as white people, the majority in perpetuating systemic racism in our state and country. We believe that our work is to dismantle racism needed to begin with us. We learned that having difficult, honest conversations increased our ability to move toward healing old racial divisions. And we agreed that our plan of action would be guided by the proverb, if all of us sweep in front of our own doors, the world will be clean. We believe that LOUCC's early experiences with our own group helped ready our congregation to support the amazing work of Respond to Racism.
So, moving forward to 2017, Willie and I knew each other from our involvement in the UCC and her time as principal in Portland Public Schools, where I also taught. And Willie started talking with me about the Nathan Shepard racist incident and said she and another person were going to have a community conversation about this. And they weren't too sure how many people were going to come. They didn't think it was going to be very many. Put a little thing out there on Nextdoor. Next thing they knew, they had 60 people reply. So they needed a bigger space than they thought. So she was wondering if maybe they could have the meeting in the fellowship hall of our church, and wanted a place that wasn't going to charge them. And so I said I didn't think it would be an issue, and I take the request to council, as we always do in the UCC. And we were fortunate Pam Rossio, our moderator here, was the moderator at the time of our church. And our entire council voted in favor of offering our space free of charge for this meeting. And so one meeting turned into many meetings, and here we are now over 3 years later. So now, Willie, your turn.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm saying that thank you from the bottom of my heart to everyone, especially the Lake Oswego UCC. Jenny and Jane and Jan and Pam and all the others that have worked with me are just so dedicated and so appreciated. So you heard how we got started with the rant on, well, I shouldn't call it a rant, but the chatter on Nextdoor and the social media is a way for you to find out a lot of information. But Nextdoor, they started talking, and some of it was okay, some was negative. Some people talked about having had racist experiences or their children. Some of them had adopted, white families that adopted Black children, had some things to say. There were other people said they'd never seen anything, and they were concerned about this whole thing of making Lake Oswego look like it had a bunch of white supremacists living here, and that a bad reputation for this beautiful city. The beautiful city that is known as Lake No Negro, as someone said already. And so Liberty said that she's had a lot of experience doing groups. And I identified myself as a retired educator with a son who had gone through the Lake Oswego schools and suffered a lot of racist experiences. And so she said, well, let's about anyone who's interested, private message me. And so I immediately responded. And then a couple of days later, Liberty asked me out to have coffee. And we got there, and I was told I was the only person out of all of those people on Nextdoor just going back and forth who wanted to really talk about it. And that says something about sort of the gossip mill after a while. And so I said, let's put it out again. And as Jan said, it's so good to have people you know. And it's so good to have a church that's aligned with what you want to do. And we had our first meeting, and then they wanted a meeting every time. And 3.5 years later, we're still meeting. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, we've had to do virtual, but the meeting space, and I have to talk about the meeting space of bringing people from all different groups, all ethnic groups, all ages together. I needed to have a comfortable space. I needed to make it inviting. And I can tell you, there's not a church that's more, oh my God, inviting than the Lake Oswego Church. And the way they have hosted us. We had food. And so I finally, we were meeting from 6:30 to 8:30. And so I invited people to just bring something that they could share with others. And because we're going over the dinner hour, and I didn't want people, I wanted them to be able to listen till 8:30. And it worked. People brought from snacks to nice meals there. And members of Lake Oswego were our hosts. That they helped set up, they cleaned up, washed the dishes, and did everything. And I'm saying that because the church in that welcoming environment was so important for people to come and feel that they're there and they can talk. And so we've gone through many, many sessions. One of the things that we're known by is our three-legged stool. And the three-legged stool came about early on because people entered our conversations at all different levels. I had one woman who said to me, how do I say hi? How do I speak to a Black person? I've never spoken to one before. And I was a little surprised, but you know, we worked through her. So that's so dialogue. You had people who had very limited experience, sometimes seeing folks either at a work situation or service situation, but they hadn't really talked to a person of color. And so our response to racism is not just about Black people. It's about people, black, brown, we are all our black and brown people of saying something has to be done. And so we had dialogue. One group would go there. Then people that thought they had a little bit of information and could go deeper, we had in the learning group. And then we had the folks who, our first meeting, we had a lot of politicians there. And of course, they all wanted to jump into action because folks thought they were ready to go out and fight racism and realize, but they didn't realize that they hadn't dealt with their own stuff, their own biases and what have you. So we pulled back and said, oh, we have to do a little bit more education, which is one of the things that's part of our mission, is to educate people here in Lake Oswego and provide them tools to fight or dismantle racism. And so that's what we're doing. So we have our tool, but we're doing a little dialogue, a little learning, and a little action all together. One of the arms of our group is a youth group. And I want to give credit to my son who's on this call. Bruce has started the Youth Empowerment Group. And there are young people who are dealing with and learning about their own biases. We have so much stuff, racist stuff and acts that are in our schools, on social media by our young people. They're saying all kinds of things. And what we want is to educate those people and to interrupt some of that behavior. And I was very happy because it ties into the young people that were learning. There were young people that with the empowerment group that helped with one of our rallies, or more than one, they've helped out. They're learning, they're working in their schools. They are also doing things, and we're starting as young as preschool. Not out there at the meetings, but the preschoolers. We've just started a story time, and part of that story time is coming out of our youth empowerment group. And so I'm very, very, they're a strong arm. And so they're working in the schools, on the streets, on social media, where we don't know. We have some young people in our association, in our organization, that take care of social media, because I don't know how to do Instagram and all of those other things. Some of us are out of that knowledge area, but we have people that are doing that. And we do, I get to talking and I get long-winded. But I want to tell you a couple of other things too. But our youth are very important. And if you want information, I will tell you, go to our website, respondtoracism.org, because I can't cover all of the things tonight that we do. We have I have a very good relationship with the folks in the city. I had a chance to go on a little delegation with a group of people that included city councilors, the city manager and the assistant manager, school superintendent, her assistants, her senior staff, and some other people, police chief, fire chief. And what happened on that little excursion was that we got to know each other and to really talk about race, racism. We had the time to check out our biases, both implicit biases and explicit biases, and to learn more about them, learn how we make decisions together, learn who is being served or who's being heard and who's not being heard so many times. And one of the things that one of the trainers said, it's a key to listen to the people who are not being heard. What's happening there? So when you're making decisions, and so I thought, okay, you know, you take that and you come back, and I said, in this white city, who's not being heard? Who's not getting contracts? Who's not being hired? Who cannot get a home here? And what's, you know, that has the city working and trying to scramble now to make some changes. They just issued a statement, you know, talking about denouncing any kind of acts of racism and what have you, and was supporting inclusion, and that they're going to be more active in doing it. I'll see. Because we go to city council meetings and have hearings, participate, and I can just go on and on and on and on talking. I don't know, Jan or Pam, might give me a little signal of how much time I have. Anyway, it's been working. If you have questions, my contact information will be someplace.
It's on the worksheet,
post it.
on the sheet.
On the sheet that's posted. Contact me and I can tell you more, because we did rallies. We had young people. We've been so active that our young people have gotten involved. And we had young people who helped to organize 2 or 3 of the rallies. We had about 5 during the summer, some social distancing, but we were outside and we had a great time with a little program with speakers that would help you, give you some more information. We heard from the young people. It was heartbreaking to hear students stand up outside in the crowd of about 300 people here in Lake Oswego and talk about the racist things that had happened to them all through school, and the things that are happening in the neighborhoods, the things that are happening, what they're being called, how they're felt, how they're treated in schools, how things are just brushed off and there's no one dealing with racism. And so there's so much out there for all of you to do, because it's not just happening in Oregon, which was the white utopia state many, many years ago. It's happening in Washington. It's happening in Idaho. And can I go? I can go into every state and you will see that that racism is there. And people, Black and brown people, are not being recognized. And so I say to my white friends here who are on board, we've been going through this over 400 years. It's not particularly your fault unless you're doing something that you need to correct. But you are like, we're in 20 plus generations of white people since 1619. And this country was built for the advantage of white people. And so I want each of you to use your white privilege to fight, to recognize that there are some people who don't have your privilege. They may not be next door to you, but they're in this country. And I want you to use your white privilege to fight for social justice. When we talk about Black Lives Matter, most of you have seen the whole George Floyd. You just saw the verdict on Breonna Taylor. And so what does that mean for life? What does that mean for Black people when they could be murdered right there on the street by a cop? What does it mean for a person to be in their own home and shot and nothing happens? And the person that shoots, one of the officers that shot and the bullet went in the wall between the 2 apartments, and he got charged for that, for the other apartment, but nothing for the 6 or 7 bullets that went there. So we need to make sure that you use your ability. And I think I've run out of time.
And Willie, I would say too, I mean, it sounds like, wow, you got going right away. It really, the last year has been busy, busy, busy. And it took a while to get it go. I mean, it was going, but it's the last year,
It's been,
but I mean, that was in year 3. But even before then, I'd say one of the most powerful things was when the students had a forum. I mean, that was
yes.
kind of early on, and they talked, and that was really moving. Like for most people, that, you know, how many were there? 6. And Bruce Jr., he was the
Yeah.
MC.
Right. He organized that whole thing with the students from the high schools, and they taped it, and all of the school board members received a copy. And so we've had changes made. The school district has a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. It all happened after Respond to Racism started. And one of the board members had my husband and I over for dinner and talked about the need and wanted me to support him pushing forth to have some kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion committee and focus with the school district. And it's gone that way. It has been. The city has a diversity and equity inclusion task force. And so people are moving, things are moving. They're having trainings, but we have so much work to do. So we can't sit back.
Well, and also you hosted and the youth hosted too. I mean, at our church in the sanctuary, we don't meet in the sanctuary, but we hosted first of all, school board member debate, and then a city council member debate, which was moderated. The moderators were high school students. Yeah.
And I just tell you, but our partner, the church, has been just a partner. So for us to, because we're not a political organization, but we partnered and we said we will offer the candidate forum for people to have a chance. And the feedback we got that ours was the one that had the most attendance in the city, and the church, you know, we just put our banners up there and made it a change. And it was, you know, for to hear what our folks were going to, what they were going to promise and how they were going to respond. And one of the pieces there, and you might use it if you have a chance with a forum, we had some lightning round questions. So you want to know real fast how someone feels about an issue, and it's a yes or no. They don't have time to think about it. It's a yes or no. You use that for voting, and it's very telling. And so that's been great. And our students are getting ready to do it again now for city council and for our mayor. Okay, Jan tells me you're ready to go, right?
Jenny.
Muted.
Oh, Jenny.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that.
Thank you, Willie. And yeah, thank you just for your leadership these last many years. And thank you just for highlighting some of the effects on the city. I was just talk a little bit about just the impact it's had on our church community, which has been awesome. But that's in the context of that's an immediate ripple. And Willie's already talked about the larger ripples into the wider community, which is huge. It's made a huge impact in Lake Oswego. And I would say for us as a church, there are so many ways that this has made a positive impact. It has grounded us in our faith and our practices of justice in a way that has just both given us the opportunity to practice anti-racism and our work, begin to understand our own privilege and our white privilege, both individually, but also as a church. It's really showed us how our faith frames that work and helped us educate ourselves about why that comes out of our faith background. It's given us an opportunity to nurture relationships with each other as a community, but especially in the wider community, with all the people who come through our congregation for Respond to Racism meetings. And as Willie mentioned, I mean, all kinds of people come. And so we get to practice hospitality for our city councilors, for our police officers, police chief, for our school board, school principals, teachers. I mean, just all the people who are really working hard to make a difference in Lake Oswego come through our doors, and we have a chance to build relationships with them and get to know them. I think it's been, Willie mentioned, or maybe Jan and Jane mentioned, the importance of having difficult conversations. It's given us a way to practice that, to learn how to do that in a safe environment, to ask the questions that we have, but maybe are afraid to ask, that dialogue part that Willie was talking about. And improved our own education and our own action. I mean, really the three stools that Willie pointed out are all things we've been able to have dialogue as a church. We've been able to have education as a church and action as a church. And it's just something that has become just a cornerstone of our mission as a church, and has shaped our whole church community and congregation. And this year we are also having an anti-racist focus as a church for the year, just to continue this work and try to build on what's already happening in our community. So it's also just a reminder, and I love hearing you share this story again, Willie, because it's a reminder of just the courage and actions of one person or one or two people, and just how that ripples out. And in our case has changed our congregation, changed me, changed our wider community, and is just rippling out, and is obviously getting national attention. So it's just huge, and it's just such a privilege and an honor to be part of this group and to get to support them in the work. So thank you, Willie.
Thank you for
Jenny.
answering that post.
Absolutely. And part of that rippling out, I just want to mention, was the Respond to Racism collaborated in organizing the first multi-city equity summit in October of 2019. And there were over 350 participants from Lake Oswego, Westland, Tigard, Tualatin, and Wilsonville. It was absolutely amazing. It was a great event. So now we're going to talk about the elements to consider in establishing an anti-racism group, and I'm going to pop that up on the screen in a minute, but I just want to let you know that this is by no means a be-all, end-all list of how to establish an anti-racism group, but it's more a big picture of some of the steps Respond to Racism went through along the way in becoming an established group. Each group, of course, is going to look different depending upon your community, depending upon the number of participants you have, the leaders you have at the beginning to help get things organized. Not everybody has a Willie Poinsette. The makeup of your community, and the reason you gathered together as a group. So some of these elements I'm going to screen share with you here. There we go. So some of the key elements are, number one, building relationships in your community, such as invite the mayor, the city council people, chamber of commerce, worship leaders to your meetings. Number two, commit to understanding the racist history of Oregon and your own community, or if you're from another state, obviously commit to understanding the race history of that state that you're from and your own community. And for us, we've had a number of speakers from local and state organizations come to our meetings to help us learn about Oregon's racist beginnings and therefore our own cities. And I can tell you, as a teacher, I have had so many professional development meetings in my lifetime, and the meetings that we have at Respond to Racism and the quality of the people that are brought in to talk with us and interact with us is just outstanding. I mean, these are people that are throughout the state and just amazing. We are just so fortunate. Number is to identify leaders with vision, commitment to spearhead. So as I say, has a Willie, but this really was for our beginning, to have a person with such vision for the group and just such a such a warrior heart that Willie has. Number 4 is to create a steering or leadership committee. And I know that's been real so that it's not all just one person, that's not up down. It is the whole community that is being asked, what do you want? And then a steering committee is helping make that come true, which is a lot of work. Also 5, co-create a group mission statement. So again, this is definitely a group effort where we all met in small and large groups for meetings to determine what and what tools we need to help us accomplish our goals. And number 6, establish relationships. Local newspaper, police, legislators, and school districts, as Willie mentioned earlier. We've received wonderful coverage in the Lake Oswego Review newspaper, and our chief of police attends our meetings, as well as city and legislators and the school district superintendent. So again, you need to build bridges and invite everyone in your community to come to the meetings and participate in the discussions. Number 7 is securing a regular meeting space, which we talked about earlier. Obviously, it doesn't have to be in a church. It can be another place. That is a key element to find. And number 8 is people focused on tackling overt and systemic racism will find your group. It's great to get the word out in the community about your meetings through a Facebook page and newspaper and emails and word of mouth. But people who are focused on tackling race will find your group. They'll notice you at protests that your group is participating. They'll see you in the newspaper. They'll see your wonderful Respond to Racism t-shirts that we forgot to wear. But word's out and they will come. We have been absolutely just and thrilled how many people are coming to the meetings. So I think now we are, stop sharing, we are ready to have some question and answers for any of us about anything that's come to your mind during this time.
Could I share one more thing?
Yeah.
Maya Gordon,
Oh, yeah.
student that you saw talking with us doing the ABC Localish piece, worked all year long, or more than this year, but worked with us and studied on her own and has a senior project. She did a documentary, Lake No Negro, that if we have the link, I'd like to put it up so that people can see it. And
It's in the document.
okay, thank you. So that people will have a chance to view it and know that that was a student that you saw there, and the student who was so touched, she needed to go and dig some history up and share it with others.
Well, and she was a student who was on that
On the board.
first board. I mean, that talked and just said, I'm ready. I just want to leave Lake Oswego. I won't come back. I'm going to go to college and I won't be back. And Oregon. Mm-hmm. But she's been an amazing leader.
Oh, yes. And I want her to stay in Oregon. We need her.
Mm-hmm.
This is really exciting for me. I worked in Lake Oswego schools as a speech language pathologist for 22 years. And at the time I was there, from mid 80s on till 2007, I was amazed at how white it was and how segregated the few blacks were. It reminded me so much of my high school days in Vancouver, Washington. And that was in the 60s. And, you know, it's just crazy that it was still like that. And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that this is happening. This is wonderful.
Great.
And I'd say that people would say there just aren't very many people of color in Lake Oswego, but then when you really look at the data, there are. And there's a lot that come to these meetings, which is which is really good. I mean, now anyway.
More are coming.
We also have, Pam put in the chat box the link for you guys for that we have. End of the handout under upcoming events. Just want to point out to you on September 30th, which is day after tomorrow, there's a community conversation called Kids, Race, and Schools. And it's going to be from noon to 1. And it's going to be on Facebook or YouTube. And you can just click on this link that we have on here to just let them know, to get the link for either Facebook or YouTube. And it is with the author Jelani Memory, who created a kid's book about racism, and Myrna Munoz, who's the principal of Regular Elemental in Northeast Portland. And it sounds like a wonderful, wonderful conversation that is going to be happening if you are available to participate this Wednesday from 12 to 1. It's at the very, very end. There we go, upcoming event. It's that last one. So hopefully you guys can do that. I think it sounds great.
So I realized that you had sort of a, I don't even know what the right word to say is, but there was an event that created a movement in Lake Oswego for this. It strikes me that we could all use the events of this past summer specifically, and of course there is a much longer history, to start something like this locally. I'm sort of torn because I know that within Lake Oswego, then there was that event, and it created this real local feeling of need to do something like this. How hard do you think something like this would be in other places if there isn't some sort of catalytic is the word that comes to mind, but that's not right. Catalytic event.
Right.
I would say right now, with everything that's going on in the country and in the world, this is the right time to step into it and start work, because stuff's happening so often here that you see, you look around you, and if you see that there is inequality, and you see it's happening, and I can tell you it's happening everywhere, that you can start small, but just start. That's the main thing.
And the events that happened, I mean, really, it was Nathan Shepard, who was a police officer, a police detective for Portland, and he lives in Lake Oswego. And really, it was because of his post that it kind of just took off. And then, Willie and Liberty got together, and it just happened. And then we just happened to be there. It's just, to me, it's such godly work. I'm just so thankful for it.
I think it's definitely, as Willie's saying, this is the right time. I mean, you really want to have a lot of energy behind it. And I'd say people's energy is really up right now. And the really cool thing is that, like, when Willie started this and had this meeting, living here in Lake Oswego for as long as we have, which is a very long time, you kind of feel like, oh, there's a handful of us who feel like this. And then you walk in that meeting and it's like, oh my gosh, there are more people who feel like we do here in the city than I ever would have believed. And that gives you a nice empowerment, feeling like you're such a small group.
And wasn't that just advertised, the first one on Nextdoor and Facebook?
It was only for Nextdoor, wasn't it, Willie?
Nextdoor.
And you put a limit to it of 60, so there would have been more, as I recall.
Well, we had 66 there.
Okay, all right, yeah.
We were, we thought that we would get 25 people maybe.
Right.
We were surprised.
We had to keep pulling out more chairs.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a
Yeah.
good thing, a good thing. I
Those
should
meetings
say
people
too,
feel-
I mentioned Liberty, and Liberty relocated to Missouri after our first year of work together. And Liberty is in Missouri working, doing the same social justice work.
Yes.
She's the same age as my daughter. She's very young, just 30. I mean, she wasn't 30 then, so 27.
But Liberty's family has stepped in too, haven't they, Willie?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It strikes me that the key was just creating the container of the space and holding the space for people to have the conversation. And I think that's kind of what you were saying, Jan, and thinking about it like in Lincoln City or wherever. Part of it is just setting the time and the space and inviting people to come together, and the people who needed to be there found their way there. And you know, it built on itself month after month. And even now, Willie will often ask how many people are here for the first time. And it's amazing how many people are still coming for the first time. So I think it's about just holding that container of space and then letting it emerge. And I think one other thing that was really important is, and I found this at church too, is often the people just, Willie said politicians were there. People want to take action. They want to get there and get the answer and go out and do it. And one of the big learnings from Respond to Racism is it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way, in the sense that we really have to do our own unpacking, our own relearning, and from that place move into action. You can do it all at once, but it was just really important about people, and especially I think progressive liberals, we want to do it. We want to roll up our sleeves and do it, and not realizing often that so much of the work has to be internal also. So that's been a big part of Respond to Racism and the church too.
David?
Yeah, first of all, just a great program. I so appreciate Willie and Lake Oswego, all the leadership you've provided. And what I was going to put in the chat was, hey, this is probably time for something to happen in Beaverton. And then Jan put up the sheet with the steps. And I think the time is definitely right, because over the course of the summer, and this is another one of those, if the time is right, things work out. When the Black Lives Matter movement really started taking off, you'll remember that lots of great films about racial injustice were available free. And so all of a sudden, so we've been meeting every 2 weeks, a group of about between 15 and 20 people, discussing a huge range of movies. We started with Just Mercy, and my folks surprisingly have this hunger for learning more about it, because they didn't learn about this history in their public schools growing up. Right. So it's almost like are you kidding me? This stuff really happened, and so. I can see from that group of 16 people, there might be a few who would grasp onto this idea of creating a, Respond to Racism in Beaverton. And so it's another chapter. That's something that I consider to be exciting, and it's definitely, I can't agree more, Willie. There's so much, it's everywhere. And especially in our community, if we include African American and any dark-skinned person, because we got lots of people who are Muslim, and but anyway, it's a real issue, and I hope that we can be proactive about it. And great inspiration tonight, so thank you very much.
Well, and Jan, I started getting a little, like, as you were going over, I'm like, oh, all those steps didn't happen at once. It just kind of built on itself. So don't feel like you have to have all that in place.
Right.
Yeah. And also that stool, that three-legged stool, I think has just been absolutely key, because when people come into these meetings, some people come in, like Willie was saying, wanting to go do action now. And other people are coming in like, I don't know any people of color, I need some dialogue. And other people are like, I need to learn some more. So if you just focused on one of those things, people who really want the action, you're going to lose them. Plus also you need to kind of, I think, rein it back in, like we were saying, to kind of like, well, we need a little bit more education before we do acting. But it was really cool. So what the steering committee organized was, at the beginning of our meetings, we would break up into 3 rooms: a learning room, a dialogue room, and an action room. And you'd self-select wherever you wanted to go
It was very
and
helpful.
have those conversations, and then come back together as one large group and debrief with what you came up with. And that was
Very helpful.
really, really helpful. And each month you could you could change groups, and that was really, really very, very helpful, I thought.
Sounds like it. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and Willie, how many, because we've been meeting now during COVID each month, we always meet the first Monday. If any of you ever want to join, feel free to join in. And of course, it's all online now. But we have our next meeting on Monday, on this next
The
Monday,
5th.
the 5th.
So you're meeting on Zoom now?
Yeah.
Yes,
And probably 125 people
or
attend
more.
or more.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So to sign up, you can go on the Facebook Respond to Racism LO page, right? And they would have the link to sign up for the meeting on there.
Right.
Yeah, because you do need to register.
Respond to racism, all one word, .org. And hopefully.
Yeah, that's just on the website. Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And if you have young children, preschool through 5th grade, have them sign up for the story time, because a part of that story time, they're going to start learning more about some basic things about history, about kindness, about treating each other, but how to deal with. They're going to see some diverse people in the stories and talk about it. And I think it's going to be great.
And the storyteller is from the Baha'i Church. So we have
Yeah.
we have many churches that are involved in this.
And early on, many of our offerings for Beyond Racism, when we first began and working with Respond to Racism, have involved the church with whom, the temple with whom we share our church building, which is Beit Havarim. So the multi-faith efforts has been very community building and empowering to all of us. I mean, building relationships is what this is about. Getting to know people and understanding.
But we've had to be very careful to not make it a faith thing, because some people would absolutely not come.
Sure.
So we are very quiet about that. And another role that our church does, I don't know anybody said this, but our office administrator keeps money for Beyond,
Respond to racism.
Respond to Racism. So she keeps track of the money for them and can help pay. I think she still does, right, Willie?
She's still doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've become a 501c3 ourselves. But Beth, who is the office manager, administrator there, is so wonderful. She just keeps helping us out.
And I'd say another proud offshoot is the West Lynn. Is it West Lynn Respond to Racism? And
no, it's West Lynn Alliance for Inclusive Community.
And then they are the ones that really took over the whole police big problem in West Lynn. Mm-hmm.
But they're very active with us.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we are very supportive of their work.
And one thing I'll add to,
come on and join us. Contact me.
One thing to add also, I think most of you probably saw it if you get on the way, but Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon is hosting, starting tomorrow, a 9-month cohort program about reckoning with Oregon's racist legacy. And that's a great opportunity to learn some of the history for those of us in Oregon, and to do that within a multi-faith, interfaith context. And so again, that starts tomorrow night. And Michael Ellick, who's a UCC pastor, is organizing that on behalf of EMO. So if you want information, you can go to the EMO website, or it's been on the way as well. There's still time to join that. They're asking for cohorts at least of 4 people from an individual congregation, but we have one at Lake Oswego UCC. We'd be glad to take in anyone else that wanted to go if you didn't have your own cohort.
And
Willie-
we're sending a cohort from our board also.
Mhm.
Willie or Jenny, would you mind talking a little bit about the silent walking meditation and how that came about?
Oh, I will start it just by saying thank you to Jenny, who has been an awesome leader for us. And so we have a silent walk that we tried out one time. And we were saying, okay, who should we ask to lead us? Should we get a Buddhist person or should we get, and they said, Jenny. So Jenny's great. Let's call her. And of course she said yes, but I'll let her talk about what she does with it because it's absolutely wonderful, very centering. And people did it one time and then they wanted to do it every month. So now it's scheduled for every month. Jenny, where are you? So you can tell them.
Yeah, well, I would just add, so it was 2 members of Respond to Racism that wanted to do this, and in response to, I think specifically from some of the anti-protesters, I don't know, that we had in Lake Oswego a couple weeks ago. And it was based off the ice walks. If any of you have done that in Metro Portland, like the Buddhist ice walks, the people had experienced some of those and wanted to kind of model it after that. So it basically is just, we get together and do, well, this most recent one was about a half-hour silent walk and meditation where we just put we would say prayers, but we use the word intentions for racial justice in our community. And what's interesting, and I think what has been powerful for people, and it's much easier to talk about this in a context of faith, is, you know, there's so much noise in the world right now, and there's obviously tons of ways to be involved in protests and shouting, but it's just such an important way, the contemplative side of working on this issue from a side of prayer and peace and silence and doing that together, just walking and quieting ourselves and just centering ourselves on what we hope for our community. So I think people liked it a lot because it was just a change for many people and just
And it's at the heart of the city.
Yeah. So they'll continue hopefully monthly, and
Yes.
with different people leading them, and just again another one of those public witnesses, but in a way that also feeds everybody who's working on it as well.
And we do it while other people there are enjoying the park, doing whatever they want to do. It doesn't hinder the work that we're doing.
No, and in fact, last time we had people join, bystanders join in, and that's really wonderful too.
Yeah, it's at Millennium Park, right?
Yes.
Well, we are past our time and we thank you for being here. You're welcome to stay a little longer and ask questions. If you couldn't get into the sheet or you lost it, just email me and I'll make sure I get any information to you. I'm sure you can find my